Good evening. This is Dr. Aparna. Namaste. I am your emotional healing synergist. I am an Ayurvedic psychotherapist, a passionate infopreneur, medical writer, and a budding YouTuber. In my pursuit to address, promote, and propagate Ayurveda and psychotherapy globally, I come up with talk throughs every week on either Ayurveda, mental health, psychotherapy, and related aspects. In the last two sessions, I was reviewing a wonderful book by name Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. We have seen many concepts from the book, but today I'm going to review it by the introduction and chapter wise synopsis so that we get a clear view of what is this book all about. You know, I just want to give some insights on what are my key takeaways on the book and the synopsis or the highlights which I thought must be shared. And let's get started. So, thinking fast and slow. See, this book is divided into five parts, each part exploring different facets of human cognition and decision making. So, uh, if I have to break down into chapters, the introduction goes like this: the characters of the story. So uh, Kahneman sets the stage by introducing two main characters, system 1 and system 2, so representing the two modes of thinking. So he provides an overview of the book's themes, emphasizing and highlighting the impact of cognitive biases and heuristics. We have discussed it in detail. If you want to watch go watch the first two sessions on the book review. So I have discussed it in detail. So cognitive biases and heuristics on decision making. So the part one talks about the two systems. So Kahneman introduces the dual system model, that is we have already I had already mentioned in both of the sessions, that is system 1 and system 2. So explaining their roles in thinking and decision making, how they are important in thinking, cognition, and decision making, both the system 1 and system 2. So he lays the foundation for understanding how these systems operate and interact. So, and next is the attention and effort. So this book explores the differences in the mental effort required by system 1 and system 2. So the author discusses the limitations of attention and the trade-offs between the automatic and deliberate thinking. The system one is automatic thinking, and the second part is deliberate thinking. So the part two talks about heuristics and biases. Heuristics, as we talked about in earlier session, they are mental shortcuts, and biases. So, the law of small numbers, for example, this law examines the human tendency to make generalizations based on small samples. So, author discusses the pitfalls of relying on limited information and the impact of statistical biases. So, what happens is, it is usually the human tendency to make generalization based on small samples, means a few of people, a couple of people. So next, what he talks about here is explores the anchoring and adjustment heuristics. We'll get into details as well. So exploring the anchoring and adjustment heuristics, what is anchoring and what is adjustment here. So where initial information anchors influences subsequent judgments. So here, Kahneman discusses how anchoring can lead to systematic errors in decision making. We have discussed about anchoring in detail in my previous session. So please refer to the first two sessions. And you come to, unless you come to the third session, and then come to the this part of the book synopsis, then you will be understanding everything. The next thing is the illusion of understanding. So this tells that this talks about examining the illusion of understanding complex systems and the challenges of predicting outcomes. So here the author highlights the overconfidence bias and the tendency to construct coherent stories from limited information. So the part 3 is overconfidence. So as we discussed, the first part is two systems. The second part is heuristics and biases. The third part is overconfidence. So, and the fourth part is choices, and the fifth part is two selves. So two selves. So we will see it in detail. Uh, you know in detail we'll study what is in the part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and part 5. So before coming into the full summary, see, the author's aim or the agenda of this book is to make psychology, perception, irrationality, decision making, errors of judgment, cognitive science, intuition, statistics, uncertainty, illogical thinking, stock market gambles, and behavioral economics easy for the masses to grasp. All these things he wants to make masses easy to grasp. So I know it is a bit difficult to understand initially. If you hear this for one or two times, it will be very useful. So this book is about the biases of our intuition. This book totally concentrates on the intuition biases. So that is, we assume certain things automatically without having thought through them carefully. So this is system 1. What we do is we assume certain things automatically without having thought through them carefully. So author calls those assumptions heuristics. Heuristics means mental shortcuts. That means um, humans assume certain things automatically. You don't have to remember. You don't have to actually, if you see a known thing like a ball or a bat or a lady with a person with a long hair, or distinguishing some things, we assume certain things automatically. That is involuntary in our brain, so we don't think about it. Those are called heuristics. So this book, he spends nearly 500 pages listing example after example how certain heuristics lead to muddled thinking, and giving each a name, such as halo effect, availability bias, associative memory, and so forth. So, first part, as we said, it is two systems. So, introduction goes like this: our brains are comprised of two characters. One, thinking fast, that is system 1, and one that thinks slow, that is system 2. Thinking fast and thinking slow, system 1 and system 2. So, the system 1 operates automatically, intuitively, involuntarily, and effortlessly, like when we drive, when we read an angry facial expression, or recall our age. We don't have to count to recall our age. But system 2, on the other hand, requires slowing down, deliberating, solving problems, reasoning, computing. Like when we calculate a math problem, choose where to invest money, or fill out a complicated form. So these two systems often conflict with one another. So system 1 operates on heuristics and is error prone. Heuristics means, I'm repeating it again and again, these are mental shortcuts. So The actual agenda or the aim of the book is how to recognize situations in which mistakes are likely and try harder to avoid significant mistakes when stakes are high. So this book is to recognize situation where where we are using system 1 instead of system 2 and avoid significant mistakes. So this author talks about when to use system 1 and when to use system 2 and when not to intermix it. So the chapter 2 is attention and effort. So here next, the concept, I'm talking about chapters, you can take it as concept in the part 1. So attention and effort. So thinking slow affects our bodies, that is dilated pupils, attention, that means observation and energy. So thinking slow affects our bodies, attention and energy. So if we think, you have energy depletion, your energy is being used. Because thinking slow takes work, we are prone to think fast. So that is called the path of least resistance. That means because thinking slow, is takes work and energy and time. So what humans do usually is humans are prone to think fast. That concept is called the path of least resistance. Laziness is built deep in our nature, says the author. So we think fast to accomplish routine tasks, and we need to think slow in order to manage complicated tasks. So we think faster to accomplish routine tasks, but when we need to when we have to accomplish complicated tasks or manage complicated tasks, we need to think slow. So thinking fast says I need groceries, but thinking slow says I will not try to remember what to buy but write myself a shopping list. So for buying groceries, the thinking fast kind of says, I need groceries. I can just say to myself, I need groceries. That is thinking fast. But thinking slow is you need a list for the groceries. So you can write down the list instead of memorizing. If it is a long list, you can just write down a list, make a list of everything, whatever is needed of groceries. So the next concept here is the lazy controller. So people on a leisurely stroll will stop walking when asked to complete a difficult mental task. So calculating while walking is an energy drain. So if you are walking and somebody's says to you that you have to complete a mental task or a calculation or something logical or arithmetical. So calculating while walking is an energy drain. Two things at once is an energy drain. So this is why being interrupted while concentrating is frustrating. So what we do is we do not walk at that time, we start calculating. We stop walking and we start calculating. So this is why being interrupted while concentrating is frustrating. If you're concentrating on something, if somebody interrupts you, that is frustrating. So why we forget to eat when focused on an interesting project. So when we are doing two things, suppose we are eating and we are focusing on an interesting project, what we do is we forget to eat and we are focusing on the interesting project. So why multitasking while driving is dangerous, these are all the examples provided by the author. And why resisting temptation is extra hard when we are stressed. So self control shrinks when we are tired, hungry or mentally exhausted. So because of this reality, we are prone to let system 1 take over intuitively and impulsively. So what we do is, at times when we require to think, think and use the system 2, most of the times we opt to system 1 to take, over intuitively and impulsively, and we get things wrong, we make mistakes. That is what author is trying to explain. That means most people do not take the trouble to think through a problem. So we do not want to take that energy, invest that time to, think through a problem. So intelligence is not only the ability to reason, it is also the ability to find, relevant material in memory and to deploy attention when needed. So intelligence is not just the ability to give a reason to something, some problem or some solution or some calculation. It is not just the ability to reason. The author says that it is the ability to find a relevant material in memory. If something we have experienced earlier, intelligence is that we just get it out so that we do not invest so much time, and to deploy attention when needed. Intelligence is also deploying some attention and focus and concentration when needed. So accessing memory takes effort. By not doing so, we are prone to make mistakes in judgment. So if you have to recollect your past memory or past experience on something, that also takes some effort. But by not doing it, we are prone to make mistakes in judgment. So here the author is trying to explain the importance of system 1 as well as the importance of system 2. So the next concept is mentioned is the associative machine. That means here he starts explaining the heuristics. So priming, we have talked about it, but we are talking it, I'm gonna explain it once again. So conscious priming, here first heuristics is talk about, that is priming. So conscious and subconscious exposure to an idea, that is primes us to think about an associated idea. So if we have been talking about the food, we I gave the example last week that if I give you a word so dash p to fill in the blanks, and before that I am priming you, I am priming people about eating, I'm talking about eating food or about food, you know the word you will fill in the blank is soup. People will consider um, soup, the word as soup, because the priming I gave was eating or food. But when the same, if I have been talking about cleanliness, washing, that the same people will fill in the blank as soap, soap, soap. It can be soup, it can be soap, according to the priming being done. So things outside of our, this is called priming. So, things outside of our conscious awareness can influence how we think. So, these subtle influences also affect behavior. This is called the idiomotor effect. So, people reading about elderly will unconsciously walk slower. If suppose I'm reading a book about elderly, what happens is my brain starts priming with that. That is also called as idiomotor effect, and I will start walking slowly. And people who are asked to walk slower will more easily recognize words related to old age. And if people, suppose if they are asked to walk slower, and they will easily recognize the words related to old age. So people asked to smile find jokes funnier. people asked to frown find disturbing pictures more disturbing. So it is true. That is called idiomotor effect. So if we behave in certain ways, our thoughts and emotions will eventually catch up. So we can not only feel our way into behavior, we can behave our way into feelings. So potential, for error. So this is a potential for error. What happens is when certain thoughts, because thoughts and emotion which will eventually catch up and you'll behave in some manner. Like if you as I said, see, the idiomotor effect. So if I say walk slower or do things slowly, we will just, our brain will just to go to the old age. And you know similarly what happens is, whatever we behave, if we behave in certain ways, our thoughts and emotions will eventually catch up. We can not only feel our way into behavior, we can behave our way into feelings. So potential for error. So we are not objective rational thinkers. Things influence our judgment, attitude. So things, external things influence our judgment, they influence our attitude, they influence our behavior. So we are not even aware of that, and we are behaving in such manner. Our attitude is in such way, and we are judging in such manner. So the next heuristics the author talks about is cognitive ease. Things that are easier to compute. That means things, cognition is thinking. See, things that are easier to compute, easier and more familiar and easier to read seem more true than the things that require hard thought, are novel and hard to see. So predictable illusions inevitably occur if a judgment is based on the impression of cognitive ease or strain. So, we always tend to do the things which are easier to do, more familiar to do. We are attracted towards it and we do that. So, how do you know that a statement is true? If it is strongly linked by logic or association to other beliefs or preferences you hold and comes from a source you trust and like. See, if I have to ask a question, that how do you know that a statement is true? So it is, that is probably more strongly linked by logic or association to other beliefs or preferences you hold, or it comes from a source you trust and like. So what you do is you feel a sense of cognitive ease, because things are that are familiar seem more more true. Teachers, advertisers, marketers, authoritarians, tyrants, and even cult leaders repeat their message endlessly. So this is a potential for error. So if we hear a lie often enough, we tend to believe it. This happens if you hear a lie over daily, over a regularly, for over a period of time, you tend to believe that lie. So, and the next is, norms. The next concept explained is norms, surprises, and causes. Here, the heuristic explained here is coherent stories, that is associative coherence. So, what is associative coherence? The author explains, to make sense of the world, we tell ourselves stories about what's going on. That means we make associations between events, circumstances, and regular occurrences. So, the more these events fit into our stories, the more normal they seem. Things that don't occur as expected take us by surprise. So, you know, we associate between the events happening, the circumstances around, and regular occurrences. So the more these events fit in our stories, the normal they will seem. So things that don't occur as expected take us by surprise. So to fit those surprises into the world, we tell ourselves new stories to make them fit. That means we say whatever, to fit those surprises, something, you expect something and that does not happen as you expect, and that creates a surprise. So to fit those surprises into the world, you to fit those surprises into the narrative, we always tell ourselves new stories to make them fit. That means everything happens for a purpose. That's why I expected something, something else happened. So we associate that to something. So everything happens for a purpose, or God did it. Okay, I expected this, this happened. So it is for a purpose and God did it. We associate this to fit those surprises into our world. So what happens is that person acted out of character, or that was so weird, it can't be random chance. So all these are our presumptions. So abnormalities, anomalies, and in our daily living beg for coherent explanations. So often those explanation involve, often all those explanation involves assuming intention. So it was meant to happen, अरे वो तो होना ही था इसलिए हुआ, मैंने कुछ और एक्सपेक्ट किया था कुछ और हुआ, तो assuming the intention, it was meant to happen. So casualty, they are homeless because they are lazy. We are interpreting everything. So interpreting providence. So you know uh there's a divine purpose in everything. We are evidently ready from birth to have impressions of casualty, which do not depend on reasoning about the patterns of causation. So this is called associative coherence. So we associate it to events, circumstances, and regular occurrences. So your mind is ready and even eager to identify agents, assign them personality traits and specific intentions, and view their actions as expressing individual propensities. So, all these could be, the author says that these could be a potential for error. So, we posit intention and agency where none exist. What we do is we add our presumptions to things which don't exist. So we confuse casualty with correlation, and we make more out of coincidences than is statistically warranted. So the next concept explained is a machine for jumping to conclusions. That is, the next thing is confirmation bias or the confirmation bias. So this is the tendency to search for and find confirming evidence for a belief while overlooking counter examples. That means we always, this is a human tendency to search for and find confirming evidence for a belief. For every belief, we search for a confirming evidence, while overlooking counter examples. That means jumping to conclusions is efficient if the conclusions are likely to be correct and the costs of an occasional mistake acceptable, and if the jump saves much more time and effort. So, jumping to conclusions is risky. Author explains here confirmation bias means jumping to conclusion without, overlooking counter things is risky. When the situation is unfamiliar, then the stakes are high and there is no time to collect more information. So system 1, what it does here is it fills in ambiguity with automatic guesses and interpretations that fits our story. System 1 is always automatic. So automatically, system 1 fills in doubts with automatic guesses, fills in those doubts with, it has automatic guesses, automatic interpretations, automatic judgments that fits our stories. So the system 1 rarely considers other interpretations. When system 1 makes a mistake, system 2 jumps in to slow us down and consider alternative explanations. So system 2 is analytical. So system 2 jumps into a slow to slow us down and consider alternative explanations. So system 1 is gullible and biased to believe, and system 2 is in charge of doubting and unbelieving. See, system 2 is in charge of doubting and unbelieving. It is analytical, it tries to analyze things, go it in a logical way rather than presuming. So system 2 is sometimes busy and often lazy. So there is a potential for error, so we are prone to overestimate the probability of unlikely occurring events to and accept critically ever suggestions. So this is confirmation bias. So we need, for every, this is a human tendency, for every for every belief we search for a confirming evidence and we overlook counter examples. So jumping to conclusions is efficient if the conclusions are likely to be correct and the costs of an occasional mistake is acceptable. So if we jump to a confirmation, or a conclusion, it saves much time and effort, but it is error prone. So this is called confirmation bias. The next is halo effect. Halo effect is the next heuristic. This is the tendency to like or dislike everything about a person, including things you have not observed. So if for the first time you see the person and you like the person and the behavior, what you do is you start liking everything about that person. But in the first meeting, if you dislike the person or the attitude, you start disliking everything about that person. So, the warm emotion we feel toward a person, place, or thing predisposes us to like everything about that person, place, or thing. So, that is the warm emotion we feel towards it. It could be a person, it could be a place, it could be a thing. See, good first impressions tend to positively color later negative impressions. Even if we have later negative impressions, the first positive impression, that is why it is told that the first impression is the best impression. So, good first impressions tend to positively color the latter negative in the latter negative impressions as well. So the first to speak their opinion in a meeting can prime others' opinions. So, the first person who speaks in a meeting can prime is can make the person think about, then make the other people think about what the person is speaking. Priming, as we understood, if I say sport dash p and I'm talking about eating or food, then it could be soap. If I'm talking about cleanliness, washing, it could be soap, soup, and soap. So the next thing is a list of positive adjectives describing a person influences how we interpret negative adjectives that come later in the list. Likewise, negative adjectives listed early colors the latter positive adjectives. If we feel that initially there is a negative adjective, or we feel something negative about the person, even though the person exhibits positive characteristics, we tend to believe that the person is, we tend to dislike that person most probably. So, the problem with all these examples is that our intuitive judgments are impulsive, not clearly thought through. That means we judge a person by the first impression, they are not thought through or critically examined to remind system 1 to stay objective, to resist jumping into conclusions, and to enlist the evaluative skills of system 2. So system 2 is evaluative. If we think of a person, here the author is trying to tell that don't judge the book by the cover. Just seeing the person for the first impression, if you think that the person gives you a warm vibe, you think the person is good. If the person does not give you a warm vibe, you think the person, you dislike the person. So the author is explaining that don't do that. So while explaining this, and to you have to enlist the evaluative skills, you have to use your system 2 here. And author coined the abbreviation here, YCAT. YCAT is what you see is all there is. Whatever you see, that is all there is. In other words, do not lean on information based on impressions and intuitions. So you do not make decisions based on the intuition you have about the person or the impression you have about the person. Stay focused on the hard data. you know Combat overconfidence by basing our beliefs not on subjective feelings but critical thinking. Don't take every according to the subjective feelings. Critically think and make thought through decisions. So increase clear thinking, that means clarity, by giving doubt and ambiguity its day in court. So these are some of the heuristics, and this is the beginning. This is just the beginning of what we the summary, the synopsis. We have so much, because I'm doing this book in detail, because understanding each concept, if you're interested in psychology, for psychology students, or who is in general interested to know about human mind and how it works, this book is very much important. That is the reason I'm doing it, and I'm giving synopsis in detail. So it might take one or two more sessions to come up with all the heuristics. So that's it for today's session. I'll be back in the next. So, if you have any key takeaways, if you have any other insights, or let me know of your thoughts on the book or on the session. If you have any queries and for appointments, DM me. So, thank you and namaste for today.